This is for certain. Everybody's jobs will change as a result of AI. Some jobs will disappear. Obviously, every single industrial revolution, some jobs are just gone, but a whole bunch of new jobs are created.
So we have to talk about this warning coming out of Silicon Valley because honestly, it's genuinely terrifying if you actually sit down and think about the implications. You have Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, fundamentally the guy selling the shovels for this entire gold rush, coming out on the No Priors podcast and basically saying point blank, if you don't use AI, you're gonna lose your job to somebody who does. And I know, we hear this all the time. Twitter's blowing up, everyone's doom scrolling, but this time it feels different because of the timeline he's laying out. If you look at the trajectory, and I want you to visualize this chart in your head for a second. 2023 was a year of the chatbot, right? It was cute, it wrote poetry, it hallucinated. It was basically a party trick. But then, and this is the massive shift people are ignoring, 2024 happened. OpenAI dropped the O1 series, the reasoning models, and suddenly the curve didn't just go up, it went vertical. We went from models that struggled with basic arithmetic to models that are effectively solving unsolved math problems, or at least operating at a PhD level in specific domains, which is just wild. Now, I want you to watch this first clip from the interview right here, because Jensen says something that is easy to miss but is actually the key to everything. He talks about the shift from hallucination to profitability, and pay attention to his body language when he mentions grounding.
So with everything that's happened in 2025 and being in the middle of the vortex with it, what do you reflect on and say, like, this surprised you most, or this is the biggest change?
Let's see, there's some things that didn't surprise me. Like, for example, the scaling laws didn't surprise me because we already knew about that. The technology advancement didn't surprise me. I was pleased with the improvements of grounding. I was pleased with the improvements of reasoning. I was pleased with the connection of all of the models to search. I'm pleased that there are now routers that are in front of these models, so that it could, depending on the confidence of the answers, go off and do necessary research and just generally improve the quality and the accuracy of answers. Mm-hmm. I'm hugely proud of that. I think the whole industry addressed one of the biggest skeptical responses of AI, which is hallucination and generating gibberish and all of that stuff. I thought that this year, the whole industry, everything from every field, from language to vision to robotics to self-driving cars, the application of reasoning and the grounding of the answers, big leaps. Would you guys say this year?
Huge, yeah. I mean, things like open evidence too for medical information, where doctors are now really using that as a trusted resource. Like Harvey for legal, you're really starting to see AI emerge as one of these things that's become a trusted tool or counterparty for experts to actually be able to do what they do much better.
That's right. And so in a lot of ways, I was expecting it, but I'm still pleased by it. I'm proud of it. I'm proud of all of the industry's work in this area. I'm really pleased and probably a little bit surprised, in fact, that token generation rate for inference, especially reasoning tokens, are growing so fast. Several exponentials at the same time, it seems, and I'm so pleased that these tokens are now profitable, that people are generating. I heard somebody heard today that open evidence, speaking of them, 90% gross margins. I mean, those are very profitable tokens.
Yeah,
and so they're obviously doing very profitable work, very valuable work.
Okay, did you catch that? Generating tokens that people are willing to pay good money for. That is the pivot point. He's essentially admitting that the last generation of AI was a toy, a massive, expensive toy. But now we have grounding, which means the model fact-checks itself before it speaks. Think of it like this. The old AI was like a brilliant intern who was also completely drunk. You couldn't trust a single thing they said without checking it. But these new reasoning models, they're like a sober, expensive consultant. They take longer to answer, which is that inference time compute we keep seeing in the papers, but the answer is actually usable. Code, usable legal strategy, usable science. And if you look at the unit economics, companies aren't just using this for emails anymore. They're seeing 90% margins on code written by AI agents like Cursor, which means fundamentally the human reasoning loop is being outsourced to the GPU. But this brings us to the part that everyone is freaking out about, which is the job market. And honestly, the mainstream narrative here is so lazy. It's always robots take everything or everything is fine. But Jensen has a framework that is actually incredibly useful. I want you to watch this next clip where he breaks down the difference between a task and a purpose, because this distinction might genuinely be the only thing that saves your career.
The next part is the near-term impact of AI on jobs. And one of my favorites is, and I love Jeff Hinton. He said, some 5, 6, 7 years ago, that in 5 years' time, AI will completely revolutionize radiology. That every single radiology application will be powered by AI, and that radiologists will no longer be needed. And that he would advise the first profession not to go into is radiology. And he's absolutely right. 100% of radiology applications are now AI powered. That's completely true. And in some 8 years' time, it is now completely pervaded radiology. However, what's interesting is that the number of radiologists increased.
Mm-hmm.
And so now the question is why? And this is where the difference between task versus purpose of a job. A job has tasks and has purpose. And in the case of a radiologist, the task is to study scans, but the purpose is to diagnose disease.
And to do research.
And that exactly, and they're doing research. And so in their case, the fact that they're able to study more scans more deeply, they're able to request more scans, do a better job diagnosing disease. The hospital's more productive. They can have more patients, which allows them to make more money, which allows them to want to hire more radiologists. And so the question is, what is the purpose of the job versus what is the task that you do in your job? And as you know, I spend most of my day typing. That's my task. But my purpose is obviously not typing.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fact that somebody could use AI to automate a lot of my typing, and I really appreciate that, and it helps a lot, it hasn't really made me, if you will, less busy. In a lot of ways, I've become more busy because I'm able to do more work. So I think that that's the second part to consider, is the task versus the purpose of the job.
So let's break that down because it's massive. A task is looking at an x-ray. A purpose is curing the patient. If your job is just a bundle of tasks like writing SQL queries or formatting Excel sheets, you're in the danger zone, basically immediately. But, and this is the self-correcting part, if your value comes from the outcome, from managing the purpose, you become the orchestrator. It's the Jevons paradox, right? As technology makes a resource cheaper, we consume more of it. Jensen is arguing that because intelligence is becoming free, we will consume massive amounts of intelligence, creating new jobs we can't even imagine yet. Although, I mean, let's be real for a second. If you look at the layoff numbers from Google and Microsoft while they post record profits, it sure looks like they're cutting the task people to buy more GPUs for the purpose machines. So take that optimism with a grain of salt. Finally, we have to touch on the physical AI aspect because this is where things get genuinely sci-fi.
Sovereign advantages in the whole stack, right? The capability to deliver any piece of it.
I guess someday we will have God AI. But
when is that day?
But that someday is probably on biblical scales. I think galactic scales. I think it's not helpful to go from where we are today to God AI. And I don't think any company practically believes they're anywhere near God AI. And nor do I see any researchers having any reasonable ability to create God AI. The ability to understand human language and genome language and molecular language and protein language and amino acid language and physics language, all supremely well. That God AI just doesn't exist. And yet we have a lot of industries that need AI. AI is, if you will, at the simplistic level, it's just the next computer industry. And give me an example of a company, an industry, a nation who doesn't need computers. And we all don't have to wait around for God AI for us to advance, right? So God AI is not showing up next week. I'm fairly certain of that.
Okay,
and God AI is not going to show up next year, but the whole world needs to move forward next week, next year, next decade. I think that the idea of a monolithic, gigantic company, country, nation state that has got AI is just
It's unhelpful.
it's unhelpful. It's too extreme. Then, in fact, if you want to take it to that level, then we ought to just all stop everything. What's the point of having even governments? I mean, why are they doing policies? God AI is going to be smart enough to avert, work around any policy. And so what's the point? And so I think that we ought to bring things back to the ground level and start thinking about things practically and use common sense.
Jensen is talking about multi-embodiment, which is just a fancy way of saying putting the brain inside the robot. If you look at the data coming out of Figure or Tesla with Optimus, the models aren't just learning language anymore. They're learning the physics of the real world from video data. Fundamentally, we're moving from a digital economy to a physical automation economy, where the AI doesn't just write the code, it drives the forklift. But here's the existential question I want to leave you with, and I really want to see your answers in the comments because I'm struggling with this one. Jensen says we will just find new problems to solve, but is there a limit? If the AI can solve the problem of scarcity faster than we can invent new desires, are we heading for a utopia of abundance, or are we just rendering ourselves economically irrelevant? I don't know, but the data is pointing in a crazy direction.